Have you seen my shows?
Yes, they're in the first drawer.
Ah.
When I met Francesco, he was still working on his album and he was looking for someone to help him realize this idea he had for an animation. As soon as he explained the story to me, I was instantly into it, and I showed him some of my old work, which really fitted the aesthetic he was after, so we kind of just went on from there. As I was in the UK and he was in Italy, we would schedule these weekly phone calls and we were writing the script on a Google Doc that we kept adding to, like, week into week. Then in January last year, he came to London and we went to a bar in Hoxton one evening, and over a few beers, we drew this entire storyboard in this little notebook that ended up being the only storyboard we worked from throughout the video. So the story starts this whole story takes place inside this uterus, and it's filled with little weird microorganisms, they're formations of ink and oil that I shot on a light box in my old living room. I didn't really have the right tripod to do this. It didn't quite allow me to shoot upside down properly, so I set it up in a very sideways fashion with loads of cushions weighing down the leg so it didn't just fall over. I wanted to have a starting point that was real footage rather than create things digitally out of nothing. So the thought process behind certain scenes became quite weird. I used a lamb's brain and some chicken skin to create this body of the creature as it's developing, and then was moving this brain around the light box. As it grows, this head, we wanted it to have this kind of really evil mouth. So I kind of took some reference from like the deep sea fish, which I generally find really terrifying. So I made this jaw out of clay and I bought some shark teeth on eBay that I placed inside and then pretty much made like a marionette out of it. So there was a string on the top jaw and I could open and close the mouth. One of the characters is this swimming organism which has human legs. And while I was still at my old job, I set up a green screen one day after work and convinced a colleague to lie on the floor and pretend to swim with her legs in the air. I was becoming really obsessed with this crazy world that we were creating. And working full-time meant that I could really only work on this in my spare time, which I didn't have enough of. So I decided to quit my job and come to Bari for summer and work on the rest of the scenes with Francesco. We built this slider to properly film upside down, particularly the scene where the little swimming organism gets attacked by the creature and we follow it through the digestion process. I wanted to physically enter a mouth with the camera, so I built this mouth throat and covered it with anything that let a slightly reddish light through. For the intestines, I cut and sewed a bunch of condoms together and then painted them red to make it look as if it's like covered in blood. As I was operating the camera, following this bacteria being digested, Francesca and a friend of ours were pulling at the different condoms to give the illusion of digestion.
The idea for this script came from my need of creating a totally invented world made of absurd creatures with their own anatomy and physiology. So I had to look for the weirdest things I ever thought of, and most of the time the answers were inside my dreams. But extracting ideas from dreams isn't that easy. First you have to force yourself to remember every detail, and then you have to be lucky to work with someone like Kat who won't judge your imaginations as futile. I used to have this recurring dream when I was 10, and I was at the beach with my family, and there were these single-eyed tadpoles in the sea, and They were deadly because all the people who got in touch with the water started dying. So I tried to draw them, and then I showed my sketches to Kat in order to explain her my idea, which was to take a revenge on these tadpoles, on these Iota oculati. I remember that in the dreams this was their name.
Francesco showed me this drawing he did of these Iota. So I used that as a reference to model them out of clay, and then I painted them and photographed them. And from the edited photos, I added a 3D render of an eye to them and then animated this whole bank.
So I wanted to take my revenge on them, making them eaten by this horrendous creature, which is also an alter ego of my creative being and the main character of this video clip. So I had my revenge after 17 years.
In the video, they're then attacked by this eating hand, and there's blood all over the place. The blood was shot in this little aquarium, and I was injecting some red ink into the water. And luckily the second shot was perfect, because every time I did a shot, I had to empty the aquarium and clean it and then fill it up with water again. One person who certainly made a lot of the scenes easier than they should be is Francesco's dad. He's the biggest dad nerd I know, and we would just go to him and say, like, we have this scene and this happens and we don't really know how to make this work. Like, could you possibly make something? And he did. Like, he's got this amazing Aladdin's Cave workshop in his basement. So he would just create these contraptions and present them to us in a couple of days. One of them in particular is in the last scene where the face starts crying this black liquid and is eventually submerged in it. He made this pump which had tubes attached to it that we had in this small aquarium, and it was pumping this liquid from the small aquarium through the pipes onto the eyes of this styrofoam head. And I had to keep filling this aquarium because the bigger aquarium was just so huge that there was this black liquid everywhere, basically.
The first part of the storyboard didn't really work because I imagined something that involved too much post-production and we didn't really want it aesthetically. So the idea was to have the main character and the other microorganisms around, making this spiral dance all together. But this wasn't very compatible with what we had, the techniques we were using, the tools we had, and also the fact that we didn't have any budget. So we rewatched the raw footage and we realized that we didn't need any editing, and there were very nice shapes made of ink and oil on the light box, so we decided to preserve them rather than doing this heavily edited composition. The next challenge was to show the first stage of the development of the main character, which was inspired by the cell multiplication process. So we started from making the nucleus with some rainbow jello, and because it had to be different from the other cells, then we wanted it to multiply, so we zoomed in and we showed this weird mix of ferrofluid and fluorescent liquid that we got from glow sticks. But again, it didn't really work because we didn't like the black background. The fluorescent liquid forced us to film in the dark, so everything was quite dark and black, and it didn't match with the flow of the pictures up to that point. Kat was still convinced about using ferrofluid, so we went back to the light box to keep the shot bright and to flow with the rest of the shots of the pictures. This was the main thing I was worried about because I wanted it to flow, I wanted it to be easy to watch, but also full of details that you might not notice the first time you watch it. This was the ultimate guerrilla video making, no budget experience, but we're really proud of it because it's the result of a collaboration between two creative souls, and also it represents something that only exists in our minds and our imagination.